Maju, welcome on to Searching for Mana.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Pleasure to have you on the show. So for a fuller introduction, we have Maju Kuruvilla, the CEO with Bolt, on the show this week. So very excited to talk to many things: payments, commerce. Bolt, I think if you go on to the website's mission statement, is democratizing commerce. And Maju has a really interesting upbringing and background that really shows why he's related to this cause that Bolt is focused on. Background in some huge companies, most recently at a very senior level at Amazon before moving to Bolt, and became the CEO at Bolt relatively recently, joined about a year and a half ago. I don't want to kind of ruin the fun of explaining what it is that you guys do and giving some scale to Bolt. So Maju, if you could be so kind to explain who Bolt are, what you guys are doing, and what your role within it is right now, please.
Thanks, Lloyd. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So Bolt is helping e-commerce merchants with one of their biggest problems, that's checkout. We provide one-click checkout experience for e-commerce merchants so they can sell their product much better and easier. We've added three values for merchants with providing that. One is conversion of shoppers for the first time, and helping them with repeat purchase, so the people who actually buy things the first time tends to come back and buy again. And the third thing is helping them to create a shopper accounts on the merchant side, so merchants can have a lifelong relationship with the shoppers and have them a lifetime customer. That's what Bolt does.
Thank you. So clearly, when you say, as you just did, incredibly valuable efficiencies and so on and so forth to provide to that segmentation of the commercial market. In terms of the company right now, so almost internally, what type of scale and geographies does it operate across, please?
Today, we are more covering the North American market. That's our biggest market. And we have had customers in Europe right now as well, but we're expanding it slowly in Europe. And within North America and Europe, we are mostly serving the mid to large enterprise market, predominantly doing e-commerce. So Lloyd, what we try to do is, you think of Amazon, consumers got used to buying things at Amazon. Amazon made buying easy. So that changed the consumer behavior. And so now they are expecting that kind of a buying experience pretty much everywhere else. Most of the other e-commerce retailers are trying to provide that experience, but they cannot do all of that by themselves. They are missing some of the core components. And the one part of e-commerce where this need to come together really well is checkout. Amazon proved with their Prime experience, consumers just can come in and just buy with one click. We want to bring that to everywhere else, so that consumers can just have that experience irrespective of wherever they go. So a lot of the merchants are trying to provide that experience for their consumers, and we are the answer for them. And what we are finding is, obviously, we want to cover the entire spectrum of merchants, and our products really cover that all the way from the very, very large merchants, like multi-billion-dollar merchants like Fanatics sign up with Bolt to use it, and coming to mid-market to all the way to the smaller merchants. But the sweet spot tend to be the mid to large enterprises is where we are providing a lot of value today.
Thank you. So just to cut around that, so we've got obviously the huge emergence of Amazon, where they're primarily doing this as Amazon products right now. And so if we shop with Amazon on their platform, that is from Amazon's crazy logistical operations. And they've made it very efficient to the consumer to purchase from them. And as you say, at checkout, it's a simple solution. There's a whole world of other small, medium, and large commerce companies that are competing with Amazon. And this is a platform, and there are others, of course, but this is a platform to give the consumer the same experience that they have got used to and prefer in some instances at Amazon. So how big is, and this can be broad brush, but how big is the market opportunity of Amazon versus other?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we really have to look at the commerce kind of evolution to really look at the answer for that. If you look at Amazon really enabled commerce 1.0, where people were not like, used to buying things online, and they were not comfortable using their credit card and buying things online and making sure that things show up. Amazon solved that. They got the trust of the consumers, made sure people can buy online, and that's how commerce 1.0 happened. Then consumers started liking buying online, and they like to now explore. They like to explore beyond Amazon, and consumers start engaging more with the brands. They like to support some of the brands, whether that's local, because every dollar you spend, it's a statement of support you're providing to somebody. So more that brand awareness and wanting to support businesses is kind of a trend you're seeing in consumer. And a company like Shopify came out, and they were like, great, we can help merchants to provide that experience, independently. And I call that commerce 2.0. Right? So now individual brands can have their own experience. They can provide directly manage with consumers. The only problem there is Shopify is a vertically integrated solution, and you need to be completely on Shopify. You got to move everything on Shopify. And that is limiting to merchants unless you are mostly in the small and medium businesses, because large enterprises have very diverse needs, and they need to have much deeper and complex technology, and they cannot be limited to the confines of Shopify. So there comes Commerce 3.0, where how can all merchants can choose their own infrastructure, stay on whatever platforms they need, and yet still provide the convenience that they are used on Amazon. And we are leading and driving that Commerce 3.0. And to drive Commerce 3.0, one of the most important things you need is decentralization. Right? You cannot support large enterprises and their growth and the diversity of experience they are trying to drive for their consumers. It cannot be provided on one platform. So we have to let these large merchants innovate, allow them to stay on whatever technology stack they want, allow them to stay on whatever payment stacks they want, and yet bring the convenience of that one-click checkout to them. So the way Bolt has built our product is very decentralized, and we work with every player in the ecosystem, and we want to create more of that competition in the market, whether that's in the e-commerce technology stack market or whether that's in the general commerce. When there is more merchants selling, that means more competition and more choices for consumers. So when you look at the market size for Commerce 3.0, that's everything in e-commerce today and a lot more. So it's a multi-trillion-dollar market opportunity. And to even quantify, for example, just purely in checkout, around 70% of shoppers drop off right before checkout on e-commerce. It's a very large percent of shoppers. Merchants spend a lot of money and time bringing them to your site, bringing that traffic, and you lose them right before they click that final checkout button. That is a $1 trillion opportunity just in US in 1 year. So, and I'm just talking about checkout. Now think about providing that convenient experience on every stack providing that in a decentralized market, it is a very large market opportunity that's sitting right in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating how you walked through that. I really appreciate that. So two's probably, I'm thinking, of the biggest example beyond Shopify, Alibaba, I suppose. And then in three, you make me think about, with decentralization and payments, considering the ledgers and the blockchain and the crypto space, what type of potential partnerships, discovery are you doing there?
Yeah. So when you think of decentralization, there are different layers of that, right? First is, can merchants choose whichever e-commerce stack they want to be on? And then within that, there are so many different players. Checkout is one of the most complex space in e-commerce stack, because until checkout, there are, shoppers are cruising through things and then adding them to their shopping cart. The minute you click checkout, you got to look at the taxes, you got to look at shipping, you got to look at order management, coupons, payments, so many different aspects. All of that needs to come together right there. And that's why checkout is one of the greatest places where you can decentralize, because if we can work with anybody, which is what we have done, we invested last 8 years trying to build all the connections to all the different players in this ecosystem, then merchants can pretty much choose anyone there, and they're not confined to any particular players. Now, one of the most important component in there, Lloyd, as you mentioned, is payments, because you got to pay when you buy something online. And payments today, and if you look at last maybe close to 70 years or so, there hasn't been a lot of innovation in payments, especially in the Western countries. Like you see in these, like look in India, they have UPI. In China, they have evolved a lot on the payment side. So there is a lot of newer, interesting payment options that has been evolved more in the East. Whereas in the West, a lot of payments has not changed. And that's largely because of how the current infrastructure is laid out and how some of the existing players have far-reaching connections into the ecosystem. But the good thing is the technology is ready for some change here. And you mentioned that, for example, blockchain. Blockchain is right in there, ready for disrupting some of these changes, where buying things online or transacting money between, whether it's between a shopper and a merchant or whether it's between two individuals, it can be really simplified using some of the modern technologies. We are a big believer in democratizing that payment infrastructure as well. And that's the reason why we made one of the biggest acquisition on the crypto side, which is a company called Wire. We are in the process of acquiring that company right now, where they have one of the largest and most widest API infrastructure covering all of the crypto and blockchain. And bringing that as part of Bolt, we can make blockchain and crypto available to everyone doing e-commerce.
Fantastic, incredibly exciting. I was talking to David Shriver of the Ocado Group very much about the technology that they use for the logistics around distributing product once it's been purchased, and the nuance between how, if it's a package with a book in it, it's a very different requirement to if it is groceries, for instance, because of course, if it's groceries and if they're a mix, you might need some to be cooled by using ice. It might need to get to the residence incredibly quickly or on a particular date. So at that checkout, as you say, and you just made me think of even more, there's so many things coming into the fray: taxes, travel, and then just on the actual product, how's it turning up, fit for purpose, is a whole different way to look at it. So with Bolt, and I know there's many things here, but do you specifically hope that Bolt is what makes the payment element as seamless as possible? Or actually, you looking at the whole piece?
Yeah. When you talked about the packaging, I was just thinking about, I used to manage Amazon's worldwide fulfillment technologies for several years. And when doing that, one of the components I used to manage was the entire packing technology. And so when we launched Amazon Fresh, that was exactly the problem we had to worry about. Is like, okay, do you put like, you don't want to put chips at the bottom of the package, right? You got to put all the fragile things at the very top. So you got to, how do you go from you don't care how things are ordered to how do you get the intelligence of, okay, the heavy things go at the bottom and the light things go at the top when you package? That has been an incredibly tough technical challenge. And same way with adding the ice pack, or whether it's a cold pack, like, we used to weigh things, and how do you kind of manage that with the addition of that? I had some of the privilege of launching Amazon Fresh fulfillment on the Amazon Core Network, as well as some of the first Amazon Prime program in New York. So it's been interesting to kind of think about all of those larger supply chain problems a lot of people don't think about when you get a package. But bringing back to the question of what Bolt think about is, Bolt really wants to make the buying easier for consumers. So we don't play a lot of roles before the checkout button, because we leave that to the larger e-commerce stack and a lot of other players to kind of bring everything up to the checkout. Bolt take over the checkout button. So one of the difference with Bolt and most of the other players, you see there are so many alternate checkout providers. You think like providers like PayPal or Buy Now, Pay Laters, and the Apple Pay and Google Pay. There are so many different ways to pay on a merchant site. They tend to be a separate button. So a consumer will have to make a choice when they are on a website to say, which one do I choose? And then there is the merchant's native checkout sitting on top. So when a merchant uses Bolt, we are not one of those alternate payment methods. We become the main checkout for the merchant. And that's a huge difference for a merchant by using our product. Is we are not adding one more option to consumer. We are making merchants' default checkout better. And we are providing a one-click checkout right there for the consumer. So the consumer doesn't even have to make a choice. They just click the main checkout button. And if they are a Bolt, they are on the Bolt network, they immediately get a one-click checkout experience right there. And it appears as if the merchant provided that experience. So think of Bolt like a gray label product, an infrastructure layer that's sitting underneath the merchant and making the merchant successful and merchant look good by providing that native checkout so simple and easy. Now, to do that, it is an extremely complex problem. Bolt is the only product that do what I just said, that is replacing a merchant's native checkout. And the reason Bolt is the only product that do that is because, like I mentioned before, checkout is an extremely complex area. It is a little more easier if you want to put a separate button up there, but if you want to replace the main button, you have to integrate with the entire ecosystem. You have to connect with everything we just mentioned before, the taxes, the shipping, the coupons, the payments, the order management system, you name it, loyalty, you name it, you have to connect with all of that. And every merchant tends to have a different flavor of all of that. So you need to not just connect with them, you need to connect with several vendors and several product lines and all of that. And then you need to swap what they have with our product. And so what Bolt has done is we built all those integration over the last 8 years. And that's the reason why we are able to provide that native experience to merchant. And it turns out that is super valuable for merchants, because merchants are looking for that. as I mentioned about Commerce 3.0, shoppers really care about the brands they buy from. They want to know where they are spending their money, who are they supporting. So what does the brands need to do? They need to tell their story to the consumers. How can you tell the story to the consumers if you don't know who they are? So you need to convert your unknown shoppers into known shoppers. And once you have your known shoppers, you have to tell your story to them and have them stay with you. Bolt helps squarely a merchant with that. And in a lot of ways, Bolt is the only product that can help a merchant to turn unknown shoppers into non-shoppers and help them to create accounts with you so you can tell your story and engage with that consumer. So more and more, without doing this, a lot of merchants would struggle to compete in the market. And consumers, this is kind of what they are expecting. And when you ask me what Bolt really focused on and solved, we are very focused on that space. We're not focused on anything before that, like adding to the cart. And there are functionalities we want to provide after checkout, which I can speak about a little bit. But what we are really, really focused on is helping merchants. And the help we want to provide there is converting the unknown shoppers into non-shoppers and converting a lot of those visitors into actual shoppers and converting those shoppers into lifetime customers.
Yeah, thank you. I call this first part of the show discovery. It's me trying to get to the aha moment, because I've done my research. I've read about this particular business for many years, spoken to people who've worked in it, and broadly speaking, I think got it, but now I've really, really understood it. Okay, thank you so much. That's really useful and obviously a monumental opportunity and clearly compelling for the reasons that you just described. So let's now go back into some of your background and go through the journey of how you ended up being the CEO. And then, as you said, we can talk about some of the exciting product lines and ideas we've got that Bolt will be a resolution for. But I think that's interesting to come back to, because you've given us a really thorough view of what you guys are up to now. So before we go into your background, I'm going to do the kind of quick searching for your mana part of this section. So I'd like you to just talk to these questions as yes or no, briefly as you like, or really go into detail, whichever you prefer. Mm-hmm. So to start with, if you could describe what a mantra, quote, or particular, let's say, book that you go back to that has been most important to you.
Well, there has been several books that kind of helped me, but the one that resonates a lot with me right now, especially since with the CEO role, is The Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger. His story about how 15 years of his leadership at Disney and transforming that has been hugely influential for me. But there, if I just go a little bit more broad about a few more other things, like when you think of commerce and enabling buying is generally exciting for me, and e-commerce generally is very exciting for me. And I go back to some of the really older books, like the Influence by Robert Cialdini, on the Science of Persuasion, where it really talks about how do you really think about what are the needs of a consumer and what does it take to get someone to buy? What are all the different psychological aspects that you need to think through from a buying perspective? So, that's more on the e-commerce side and kind of on the business side, whereas from a leadership side, the one I mentioned before.
Thank you. At the moment, what keeps you up at night?
Well, I mean, I love to move fast, and what kind of keeps me up at night is I always wonder, are we moving fast enough? Can we go even faster? Because the consumers' expectations are always going higher and higher, and both consumers and merchants are expecting. They look at us as a innovation partner and a thought leadership partner, and so they are expecting us to innovate for them. So really looking around the corners and really making sure that we innovate ahead for everybody else. So going fast enough.
If you could have the front cover of whatever your favorite publication is, but think of something large, it could be Forbes, Bloomberg, the New Yorker, whatever it might be, what would you put on the front of that magazine?
It's an interesting question. I would say building the biggest shopper network on the planet.
Fantastic. That's large. Is there a particular or any things that you could talk to the audience about, your daily rituals or habits that you think are really valuable to you?
I walk a lot. Walking is very important for me. So that's when I reconcile my thoughts, find answers to things, also kind of de-stress me. I look into the horizon. I try not to talk or distracted when I walk, just walking. So like to walk at least an hour every day, and it's a key part of.
Do you do that in a particular time or just whenever you've got the time?
I do in the evenings. So evenings, I feel like day is complete, and it's a time for you to reconcile and figure out what needs to be done, what needs to be ignored, what needs to be done short term and long term. But I always ask question myself: am I thinking big enough? Right? Like, this is a big problem. What we are trying to solve in the world of commerce, and commerce is always going to be more, not less, and consumer expectation is always going to be higher, not less. So are we thinking big enough? And sometimes when you get really busy and when you are get tactical, you tend to forget about that. So this evening walks are a good time for me to put things into perspective and really think, are we thinking big enough?
And are you doing that without any music or any distractions, just walking in your thoughts?
Yeah, I try to go as deep into the nature as possible. So walking in the nature without any music or anything. So more connecting into the nature and in the woods would be the best part.
Maju, do you set off without any particular type of self agenda, or do you tend to set off saying, okay, I'm going to think about, am I thinking big enough? I'm going to get through a series of business questions I have. There's intention to it. Or you just let the serendipity of the walk and it come to you?
It's more the latter, because what I have found, Lloyd, is when I think structured, I'm constraining myself right there and then. So one way I think about always is I look for 5 years from now, is this important? And most of the time, that answers the question for me, because sometimes, whether that's a relationship with a customer, whether that's, figuring out an employee and should I be, investing, doubling down on employee, or whether that's a new product investment. And the question really is this going to be important 5 years from now? And sometimes the answer can be pretty simple right there. It may be no, I'm just trying to solve something small, and I'm so stressed out about something short term that I'm forcing myself to make a decision, or I'm looking for a short term victory here, and so that is one framework that I always use, and majority of the time, interestingly enough, that gives an answer for most of your problems.
Yeah, great advice. And to set off your day, is there something that you do as a ritual to put you in the right frame of mind?
I do in the mornings. I do a small breathing exercise. It's one of my friend kind of gave me. It's a very short a video. It's an instructor-led breathing exercise, It's extremely short. That's the beauty of it. It only takes like less than 5 minutes. A few kind of adjusting your breathing and kind of really getting in control and kind of getting your heartbeats and your body, everything into a rhythm. It's something I do. And I have been doing it for very long that now I don't even think about it. But and it's very short. So it's not like, doesn't matter if I get busy. It's not like my evening walk, which takes time. So I need to plan for it. Whereas the morning one is extremely less than 5 minute kind of an exercise. And when you asked me before, I even forgot about it because I do it all the time that I don't think about it.
Fantastic. Let's try and find out when you're thinking about, let's think bigger and all these huge ambitious things, where that's really come from and why you're so ambitious on these points. We'll get to that after the final question. So you're on searching for mana. Mana is magic. In gaming, you have your power and you have your magic. So the magic can be jumping really high, sword skills, running super fast, being able to disappear. What would you say, Maju, your mana is?
I'm a builder at heart. I love building things, and I love, like, whatever I build, solve simple things for customers, like something that impacts people every day. So, for example, when we launched, Amazon 1 hour delivery, and that was something that nobody has known about or seen before. And I still remember when we were delivering the first packages in New York to some of the first customers, you see this, like, the dazzle in their eyes when we deliver. They're like, "Oh, we just ordered this, like a few minutes ago. How did you bring it?" And it changed, people's expectations. It changed the world. Now, 1 hour delivery or same day delivery is not a big deal because you just expect that. That is not true when we launched that at the first time. So building now, and I did the same thing with global supply chain, whether that's solving some of the things in a variety of different places. And we are doing the same thing at Bolt. We're using deep technology innovation and solving some of the really, really complex problems and make it available to people as a very simple, convenient product that fundamentally change people's just day-to-day life. And building those kind of high leverage, impactful, complex product and handing over as very simple, convenient things for consumers excites me a lot. And I get passionate about that. It doesn't matter what is the industry or wherever we are doing it, but obviously commerce and payments is where I'm going to do that for the next, several years. But that gets me excited. The building those things got really, really excited.
I can see that, and it's inspiring to see that in you. I'd like you to go back as far as possible and set the scene for the audience so we can understand personally, before we go into a little bit of the business journey, really what environment and experiences might have lent you to the character that you've developed. So just far back as possible, if you could, please.
Yeah. So I grew up in India, Lloyd, and grew up in actually the southern hills. If you hear about spice trading in India, that's where I came from. And I grew up in a very generational spice trading business family. And while we had a fairly established business, we were constantly kind of struggling from being a big success one day and being a failure the next day. So a constant chaos is of a business family is what I'm used to. That's how I grew up, and that's the only thing I knew, and that's what my entire family has been doing for generations, and even my brother still doing. It's the same business. So a deep appreciation of what does it mean to be in business and how personal that is for everybody is involved. And there is a real person and a real family behind all of this, and the struggles of them is something I can deeply understand and appreciate and ingrained into my DNA. Now, I left from there, though. I went to a very professional lifestyle. I went and saw computers and started studying computers and everything. Went to a very much professional side. And initially, it was a fascination of the computers and how it can help solve the world. But what I have always found in my journey, including when we were helping with a large amount of sellers at Amazon, is how can we help all the people who are trying to do business, especially the small businesses. How can we help them? How can we bring technology and tools for them and empowering them to especially have them compete with the larger counterparts of them is in my DNA, and I get deeply excited about that.
Could you tell a story from the time where you were in that family business? So, you go on to be highly educated and you were inspired by technology and you have the empathy from seeing, a family trading business. But that really quite quickly going through what could have been a huge, your whole life up to 16 just is everything. What's the story from that time of what you actually did and, how you were involved with that family business?
Yeah, I mean, before we go to school, for example, we used to go to the shop, and sometimes you've been asked to sit there for an hour and man the shop because this is considered as part of the family's responsibility. So you do that, or you after school, you don't go to play with everybody else. You are asked to come back, and you got to help the family with some of the business side. So that's considered very common. I thought everybody did that until I went to university and found out that most of the other people have never done anything like that.
But how did you find that when you were doing it? Was it this is just what I have to do, or were you like annoyed that you had to do that, or did you love it?
To be honest, I was annoyed at that time. I was like, okay, really, do I have to go do that? But now that I look back at it, I fondly kind of think of that experience and thankful to the opportunities I had that nobody else had at that time. But I was not excited about doing those. But one example that kind of vividly comes out, and I haven't spoken about it broadly, is we at one point we lost a lot of money in the business process. Like there was a Indian, it was when the prime minister got assassinated, and there was a big curfew in India, and the prices of all commodities went down, including spices, and we had a big position in a lot of that, and we lost a lot of money. And so there was a period of time after that where our family had a lot of deep financial troubles, to a level where when people used to come to our shop and ask for money, and we didn't have money to give, so the parents didn't want to be out there and say that, so they used to send me to tell the creditors that, hey, we don't have money. And I'm like really young, I don't even know what I'm dealing with, but you're sitting there with this angry creditors who are asking for money, and I'm sitting there as a young child telling them that, hey, I'm sorry, you can scream all you want, but the reality is, unless you help us to survive, you are never going to get your money back. And I vividly remember that kind of experience, because I mean that gave me a lot of perspective, and in a lot of ways, even now when I'm in business deals or negotiations, it kind of helps me kind of thinking that what's the worst thing that could happen, and why these things are important, and how in any negotiations, unless both parties have some kind of a win, it's not going to be successful. So you got to find for the win-win solution, irrespective of whether one party has an advantage over the other or not.
Thank you for that story. God, what a tricky situation to be put into. Not that potentially at that point you really know what's going on, as you say, but it tends to be useful, doesn't it? When, if you run a small business, you run a massive business, and you kind of get tunnel vision on what to you feel like these huge monumental challenges, to give context to it. And I think we've been given a couple of good pillars there. One is thinking, well, I mean, I was in a situation that couldn't have got any worse. Let's create that grounding. And then also, does this matter in 5 years? And if you can balance somewhere in between that, often it will be in between that. And you can start, trying to stay calm through your strategic thinking and not become too stressed. I wonder how that's set up. I always think that, somebody gets to education, they've probably already had their grounding in risk tolerance created. Not always, but more often than not, it can be somebody's been given a chip on their shoulder. For instance, I wasn't as well off as my peer group, and I want to get those materialistic things. It could be I had no money, and so I'll do anything it takes to go and get that. But actually, the baseline is, but I never want to be put in a position where I don't have any. Or it could be, well, I've kind of got everything that really I want. So I'm just focused on legacy already. There is thousands and thousands of different drivers. Do you expect by this point that had given you as a risk tolerance and an ambition?
Well, I mean, if I go back to, again, my early childhood, and I was thinking, what was the driver behind anything I want to do? In a lot of ways, when we went through those cycles I talked about, I was not happy about it. And I almost felt like, it's, being inferior in that situation. And you wanted to compete, you wanted to win. And you wanted to see that, okay, this won't happen to me again, and this is not a situation I want neither my family in or myself in or my kids in the situation. So what it kind of made me in a lot of ways is very competitive and a desire to win in all situations. And whether that turns out into academics, or whether that's taking into leadership positions, or whether that's trying to make business successful, kind of always thinking about how do we win, not short term, like winning doesn't mean win today. Winning today would be nice, but winning consistently and long term is what is even more important. So that, in a lot of ways, that's kind of more of me of being a hyper, really, really competitive and not wanting to lose and never having to have that again is what the driver. And in a lot of ways, I never think of anything is done, right? It's not like, okay, I got this much, or that's great. And to me, nothing is done. There is a lot, the world is moving, and there's so much more there are so many problems to be solved, and there's so much more opportunities. Technology is evolving so fast that the problems we can solve today are much broader than the problems we could solve before. So how do we constantly, first of all, continue to know the problem? And you can only know by constantly in touch with customers, constantly talking to all the people around you, and then know technology, like really go deep and understand technology especially as the technology is evolving, continue to stay up to date and understanding that. So totally staying in touch with the problems and staying in touch with the technology. The kind of problems we can solve are getting bigger and broader, and that keeps driving me, and I keep looking at what's next and where can I help.
Thank you. And if you were now to take us to where you feel like, and I use this phrase, you first appreciated your commercial maturity. So we're through education, we're through kind of some of the grounding you had growing up, but that, for me, there was a moment I can look back to where all of that combined into, okay, this is, the sphere that I want to operate in. It's bigger than me, but I'm super passionate to go build and innovate within it. There's the moment that you appreciated your commercial maturity, and talk us through what you were up to at that point.
Yeah, so coming to Bolt is a great experience of that. So before coming to Bolt, I worked at Honeywell and Microsoft. Then I had the opportunity to be one of the early first engineers at a healthcare technology startup. We built that out for 10 years. Really, the technology what we used is powering majority of the payment transactions between hospitals and insurance companies in the US today. We sold that to Hearst Business Media. Then I went to Amazon, got the opportunity to lead some of the Amazon global businesses for a long time, was there for 8 years. And then I came to Bolt. And so I had this unique experience of kind of working in very large companies for a very global scale, as well as growing company from absolutely the first person to hundreds of people. And in a lot of ways, Bolt was the next step. Bolt kind of grew from that 0 to hundreds of engineers. So now, and he's trying to solve this big problem. How do we solve that? How do we take from where we are and kind of build the largest shopper network on the planet, build one of the most relevant company in commerce? How do we do that? So I felt like that's a great opportunity right there. So when we started looking at Bolt as our product, we started thinking, how do we really make Bolt relevant in commerce? What is the most important thing we can bring here? And we started thinking about the shopper network. So before that, Bolt was mainly focused on checkout. Bolt wanted to help checkout on merchant side, and we still focused on that. But how about if there is a shared shopper accounts network that connects all these different merchants together? That would be fantastic. So now you have a network effect. You have a product that's helping each merchant by itself. But as you have more merchants, every merchant can contribute their shoppers into this. Think of a shared shopper network. Think of a shared distributed prime network that every merchant can contribute and every merchant can take benefit from. So now we create this network effect that can grow massively because now you have more merchants, our network get bigger. As our network get bigger, more merchants want to be part of it. So now we have a flywheel that just continuously running. So taking a business that's kind of solving one business problem for individual merchants to converting that into a flywheel and a network effect, it was like a big giant leap and a step. And that triggered, if you look in a lot of ways, when we turn our business into largely that network company, the scope of Bolt and the kind of problems we can solve fundamentally change, and the impact we can provide to merchants and all the shoppers fundamentally changed.
Yeah, amazing. And do you, for that flywheel, you're saying that the merchant consider it a benefit to enter into that ecosystem? There's scenarios where they wouldn't want to.
Yeah, it's a great question. So now the question really is, who is the merchant competing with?
Yeah.
They are competing with the Amazons of the world. Amazon has a massive shopper network all by themselves. That's the Amazon Prime that's making Amazon successful. Amazon knows pretty much every shoppers on the planet, and they know everything about them. They can target them, give them a very personalized experience, and give them a convenient one-click checkout experience. Every merchant is competing against that, and they cannot build. No merchant, even the largest one, for example, like Walmart, struggle to build a shopper account network that they can compete with Amazon. So what is the best alternative? So you're competing with Amazon, and you cannot. It's very difficult for you to build a network all by yourself. So the best thing all merchants can do is come together and share, be part of this network and build this network where now merchants have access to this large pool of shoppers and a lot of information. So in the future, let's say a shopper coming to a merchant site for the first time, they've never been there before, they're coming for the first time. They type in their email, and if they are using Bolt, we immediately can give them a one-click checkout experience. It works like magic. And it's a great experience for the shopper because they've never been on this site. and they get a one-click checkout experience. And that's great for a merchant because we know with data that when you provide a one-click checkout experience, there is a 50% higher probability that a shopper will convert and tends to buy. Because Lloyd, think about it, like you go to a site, you've never been there before, you want to buy something, it's asking for all this additional information and your credit card and shipping. Now that's a lot of friction. People are like, oh, I would rather just go and search and buy from Amazon or somewhere else because it's convenient. But if you remove all of that friction on that site and make it easy, there is a 50% higher probability that people will end up buying. So when you think as a merchant, the conversations we tend to have is around this. And with the conversion lift a merchant see with our product, and the repeat purchase lift they see with our product, and the number of shopper accounts we are able to help create for the merchants, yeah, they love it. They want to be part of the network. And we are starting to see even larger merchants signing up for it.
So if we were to consider, your previous boss, Jeff, has done pretty well over the last couple of decades. Is that about to change? Do these all exist in the same ecosystem for the next 5 years, of course, but if we go out 10, 20 years, the new collaborative, more decentralized way of shopping, is that just a niche on the side of the second option in Amazon? Do they all exist in different lanes? Or actually, does it move to, version 3? And, I'm not just saying Bolt wins everything, but maybe it will. But actually, Amazon's kind of, we control the whole product, and Shopify's, we control the whole product, just isn't going to compete.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a short-term, medium, and very long-term kind of view on that, I think, Amazon will continue to be successful. Like there is no questions asked. I mean, I've been part of that ecosystem. I know how they think. So they are going to continue to be successful. But what the important thing is, consumer behavior is going to change. And it is changing, and it will continue to change. So it's less about whether the company has the capabilities or can they provide and execute. It's more what the expectations and the shoppers are. And you see that, especially in Europe, more and more shoppers don't necessarily care for a very centralized kind of doing things. And if you look at the younger generation, more and more people don't want the centralized control. Like people like more decentralization. People expect more kind of power given back to the merchant. People expect more competition. People expect more choices. So it's less about whether the company can provide, it's more where the shopper expectations are going to be. So if you ask me a long-term view, more and more, every company will be forced, including the larger ones like Amazon's, will be forced to be more decentralized and more democratized. And the future is going to be more of that. And for example, one of the consumer behavior change we are seeing a lot is shoppers who are buying on, let's say, Amazon, and then they are buying on the brand site, and those will continue. But now there is this newer segment where shoppers are buying at the point of discovery. Yeah. So whether they are
on TikTok,
or whether it's a blog, or they're following an influencer, they're reading a review, they're reading a blog, they're seeing an advertisement, and you ideally want to enable, commerce enable all the surfaces so people can buy at the point of inspiration. And again, we spend a lot of time thinking about that. We acquired a company called Tipser from a Swedish company who has been doing this for the last 8 years. And we are building as part of our Bolt's capability, because Bolt want to help buying easier, help make it easier for people to buy. It doesn't matter whether that's on merchant side, which is going to be majority of the use cases, but also at that point of inspiration where people see the product. So more and more, again, it's all about that consumer behavior change, because I strongly believe consumers are going to drive where the future is. And if you think one of the dominant kind of theme emerging from consumers, especially the younger ones, are more of that decentralized kind of experience. And that's important for them. And I think that'll change how the world operates.
I think that the technology platforms and social behaviors, then the consumer's expectation being set from that initial wow factor of, it's been sent in a day, to this is just what I expect, to actually that's not even acceptable, is obviously progressing steadily. I think that if you go on to Amazon and I try and order a pair of size 10 trainers, if that's what I'm after, it will be there, but it won't be all of the options. And it probably, for that luxury, will charge me at a premium. So what is very frustrating is if that point of inspiration experience means that I have to go around a bunch of boutiques where I really love the look of the product. I'd prefer not to get it from Amazon, but it's a pain, or it costs more. So as you say, if we look out into the horizon, I absolutely believe what you're saying is an exciting prospect, and it'll get there. The timing will be undulated. But I do see that will probably be a huge threat to Amazon. So that'll be interesting to watch. And obviously, this is an incredibly well distributed, bright company with all the resources in the world. So I'm sure they can be agile. But does that end up with them having to also connect into the decentralized ecosystem, and it all becoming more fragmented, or will you have 1, 2, or 3 different options? But as you say, all really I care about is that I can efficiently select what I want and it be what I want, and for it to be really, really seamless and simple, and for there not to be a drop down of 10 buy now, pay later offerings, having to connect my bank cards, all of this, plethora of inefficiencies. So, the focus of Bolt, for many reasons, but certainly for that one point, is massive. So I think you've walked us through a whole load there, and it explains what I think the Hollywood version is. But I'm going to ask you just to conclude, because your time is very precious. So last question is, if you could just say, what the Hollywood everything version is, in the next several years with Bolt, and give us as much scale as possible, please.
Well, every merchant will be using Bolt. And here is the reason why. Because we are building the biggest shopper accounts network on the planet. And as more merchants come as part of our network is continuing to grow. And as the network reach a certain threshold, today we have 14 million plus shoppers on our network, and we just started it last year. So the network is growing extremely fast. And so you are seeing is larger and larger merchants are signing up with Bolt right now. And we are very focused on enabling and making these large merchants successful with Bolt. And that's going to continue to accelerate the growth of our shopper accounts network. And as the network reaches a certain threshold, it's something every merchant will want and cannot avoid. So we expect everything, all merchant adopting Bolt, and everything on the internet buyable will become buyable with one click.
Unbelievable. Well, it's going to be a big journey then. So Maju's time needs to stop now, but we'll definitely want to come back to you guys and talk about many more things as this moves forward. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Lloyd. It's been a wonderful conversation.